Coming up on this episode of Nintendo Cartridge Society. Isn't Mario supposed to be a plumber? They should hire him to stop all these dang leaks. Top of the waterfall, so the Nintendo Cartridge Society falls with ya. Welcome to Nintendo Cartridge Society. My name is Patrick Ellers, and I am joined, as I'm always joined, by my co-host, Mark Mitchell. We've got a good show for you today. We're going to be talking about the news from the last couple weeks, and then on Thursday, we are looking back at Nintendo's big transition years. But Mark, in the meantime, how's it going?
It's going great. It's great to be back for another year.
Yep.
Presumably, the Switch 2 will be released this year.
I'm going to say that's my, hey, we're not doing predictions.
We're not.
That's my lock, though.
Oh, okay, yeah.
That is my
you're
lock.
locking it in.
It'll be announced and released within this calendar year.
I just think it'd be really funny if, we're doing all these episodes and stuff with the assumption that the Switch 2 is going to come out this year, and then before the end of March, they have a big announcement, which is like, look forward to it next year.
Right. No, I don't. We're not doing predictions.
No.
But I don't think that's going to happen.
I don't think so either.
I guess we're doing we can do negative predictions of I don't think that's going to happen.
Right. We have locks and we have negative predictions. Here's another thing.
Yeah, thank you.
When you were reading the cold open, Top of the Waterfall, do you think this is the first example of an Irish character in the Legend of Zelda series?
I think that's what he pops out of a little pot of gold and says Top of the Waterfall.
I think so.
Yeah, it's this is one of the more challenging pieces of Zelda dialogue that we are opening an episode with, and it makes me it makes me thirst for the simple days of It's Dangerous to Go Alone. Take this.
We did it to ourselves.
We did do it to ourselves, but we're making good progress.
Yeah,
here.
and I like that we'll have gone through all of the dialogue in the original Legend of Zelda.
So if you listen to all of our episodes of the show where we sample all the different lines of dialogue, you will have basically had the complete story experience of the original Legend of Zelda.
Yeah, that's right.
It's the same as playing the game.
Yeah.
Probably. Speaking of playing the game, you can go on over to Patreon, where you can support us if you go to patreon.com/Nintendo Cartridge Society. And if you are supporting us at the 8-bit or the 16-bit levels, you get access to our once-a-month episodes of miniseries like NCS Arcade.
Yes. So in previous seasons, Patrick and I have mostly played through games that we've never beaten before.
Yes.
And for this first episode of NCS Arcade Season 3, we thought it would be fun to take the arcade part of it literally.
Yes.
And so we are going to be playing the arcade versions of Donkey Kong, Donkey Kong Jr., and Donkey Kong 3, and discussing all of those at the end of this month.
Also, look, there's something I want to float here, something that I had mentioned previously that I'm just going to pin again here for us at the top of the year. The year 2025. What happens in 2025? Mark?
The Nintendo Switch 2 comes out?
Popeye enters the public domain.
Okay.
Just as we're talking about Nintendo published arcade games, Popeye enters the public domain.
Is this a lock as well?
No.
Okay.
This is a prediction. I'm just saying whatever was holding Nintendo back from publishing their Popeye for NES and Popeye in the arcades, and to a lesser extent the Popeye Game & Watch, that those barriers no longer exist.
Okay, I hate to do this. I genuinely hate to do this, but I can't help but be pedantic. So technically, the version of Popeye that entered the public domain is the original.
Is comic strip Popeye's discrete from?
So they're at this point, certain things had not entered Popeye, as in at this point the spinach connection didn't exist. That wasn't introduced until later, and so if there is spinach or any of the stuff that was introduced
and
there's
definitely
in Popeye, then it's not in the public domain in the US yet.
So that was actually going to be my follow-up question is Bluto, Olive Oil?
I don't
Do
know.
they
Yeah.
premiere at the
I
same time?
mostly know Popeye from the cartoons from the 30s,
40s?
50s.
Look, we don't know him that well.
Do you like Popeye?
No.
I don't think I do either.
I mean, there's a lot I don't understand about Popeye, right? That he's like 28 years old and looks like that, right? He has like a monstrously young
nutrition
age.
was different back then.
As evidenced by a can
He was
of
a
spinach.
sailor,
Right.
so he was just getting hit in the face by wind and salt water all the time.
Right? Cannonballs, maybe. No, I would say I largely don't understand Popeye's appeal.
But ignore me being pedantic.
Right.
And what?
Oh, I'm just, as long as we're talking about like Nintendo arcade games.
Yeah.
That's another one that may be free of some shackles.
Uh-huh.
Although you make an excellent point that it could, just like Steamboat Willie is like a discrete slice of
Mickey doesn't even have gloves in Steamboat Willie.
That's right. But he sure does play like a marimba that's not a marimba. It's like a cow,
a goat or something.
Goat. That's right.
Yeah.
This has been too much of a sidetrack.
All of this is to say
that
NCS Arcade continues, and if you're in the 8-bit or 16-bit level in our Patreon, you can enjoy those episodes and also past miniseries that we've done, including NCS Detective Club and NCS Goes Broadway. Also, anybody can follow us for free on Patreon, or if you're following us at the 4-bit level. So basically, everyone who follows us on Patreon, and everybody should, because you can do it for free.
Yes.
You get access to our listener feedback episodes, which we've been doing after each episode of NCS Arcade. We encourage you to send us emails about that game and that franchise, and then we will talk about them. And also, we will go on tangents like we did about Popeye and spinach.
Should I have
public
saved
domain.
that for?
No,
for
I thought it was all good stuff.
Yes, so we will be recording our listener feedback episode for Mario and Luigi Superstar Saga on Wednesday this week. So get your emails to us if you have not already. Nintendo Cartridge Society at gmail.com. And we will include your thoughts, your questions, what have you, in the episode itself. And again, anyone can send those to us. Anyone can listen to that episode. It is free. If speaking of things that are free and only take an email, you should be in our Discord if you're not already. Email us, Nintendo Cartridge Society at gmail.com, and I'll send you an invitation. And then lastly, before we get into the business of the day, I was on an episode of Video Games, a Comedy Show this week with previous guests on the show, Jeremy Schmidt, also Mikey McCaller, who joined us for our zombie episode. He was living in my panic room, of course. And we talked about things we were excited about for this year. So if you want to hear that kind of talk, we're not really going to be doing that kind of look ahead on NCS, but check it out over there. Mark, are you ready to talk about what we've been playing this week and maybe for the last 3 weeks?
Yeah, let's do it.
We have both been playing
Shovel Knight.
We are going to be on Connor McCabe's Call Me By Your Game co-op about Shovel Knight later this month. And we are also going to a Shovel Knight concert in just a couple weeks, which is very exciting. Mark, what is just generally your experience with Shovel Knight before playing it for this episode?
Yeah, I remember you really liking it on the Nintendo 3DS.
Yep. And
I bought it on the Nintendo 3DS. So it must have been fairly new. We're talking over 10 years ago.
Right.
That this happened. And I remember starting it on the 3DS and hitting a wall for a reason that I honestly think was that I found the controls too difficult, and then put it down. And I didn't make it that far into the game. Put it down and have not returned to it.
Yeah.
But Connor messaged us saying that the treasure trove was on sale on Switch a few weeks ago. I don't know if it still is now, for $20 or something like that. And so I was planning to play it before we went on his show and before we saw this concert on the 3DS, but I picked it up on Switch instead and have started playing it. And so the experience, for whatever reason, for me, has been very different on Switch than it was on 3DS. And I can't really explain the discrepancy other than time passing, maybe? I don't know.
Maybe your hands are also just like more acclimated to like the Switch controller. We have bigger buttons.
Yeah, that's
right?
true.
Bigger D-pad, or however you're controlling the
I also
Shovel
feel
Knight.
like, yeah, well, I'm actually not even, I guess I don't even really have a D-pad because I play with the Joy-Cons.
Right.
And so maybe, because the 3DS D-pad, in my opinion, is not very good, so maybe that is making some sort of difference.
Yeah, it
I
might.
really don't know how to account for it. But my experience this time is very different. I'm being, I guess, a little cagey about it because
Right, because we're gonna talk about it more on Connor's show.
But what about you? Because this has to be the 8th time you've played through it.
Ooh,
What would you guess? 4th time?
I would say this is probably my 5th time playing through Shovel of Hope, the like main Shovel Knight campaign. Yeah, I think that's right. And I have beaten it, and I'm now, and we got a couple weeks before we get to record this episode, and I'm like, should I jump into some of the other campaigns, because I like them all except for Plague Knight. Yeah, I don't know. I sort of just think it's like a perfect game, and is exactly like the way I want to interact with like a platform action game. So yeah, I mean, I've sung the praises of Shovel Knight a lot on this show. And I'm sure we're going to do it on, or I'm going to do it on Call Me By Your Game as well. So I will save my observations about it until then. But I'm having a blast with it.
I've also been playing Mario Kart 8 Deluxe over the holidays. I was visiting family, and my nieces and nephew, in particular, one niece has just become like a Mario Kart fiend.
Yes.
And is getting very good at it. She just turned 6, and so we still play with like the kind of like bumpers on,
right.
So it will go forward for her automatically. It doesn't let her fall off the side or anything.
Right.
But with those in place, she is getting very good, and that's been a lot of fun. She really likes King Boo. It's like her favorite character.
Cute. Love it.
Like so yeah, that's been a lot of fun.
I also played some Mario Kart 8 Deluxe with nieces. 8 and 10 is how old they are, and they're pretty good at it, but kind of similar. It's tough because Sarah and I play so much, and like we're pretty good at it, and like when we play together, when we were playing all 4 of us over Christmas, it's just like, oh yeah, I don't know, we just like stomp them. Like it's not even like it's not even like kind of fun. But we played also Super Mario Party Jamboree, and that game is a lot more of like a leveler, right?
Oh sure,
where, yeah. Even the 8-year-old can like win one of the mini games just because like you're not paying attention, or like they're decent at games, and like it's just not that deep. So like there's just more room for children to succeed.
Oh yeah, totally. Yeah. Well, I let my niece win.
Yeah.
And so what the role I usually play is like I'm in second place, and I act as like a sweeper, where like I'm throwing stuff behind me, and if somebody passes me, I'm like letting somebody pass me so I can hit him with a red shell and get them to fall behind a little bit, kind of like protecting her first place bubble as best I can.
Sure. And if they had a first place bubble for me to defend, like that might. But also with Sarah and I both in there, it's like, I don't want Sarah to beat me. No, I don't know.
No, it all makes sense. It all makes sense.
We also played a fair amount of Nintendo World Championships NES edition, which this is the first time I got Sarah to play it with me, which great. But also the 8-year-old, the 10-year-old, and also their father, who hasn't really played video games in a long time, but grew up with an NES, with the Super NES. So like he spoke the language of all these games, and like knew how to do the Zelda things as they popped up, knew how to do the Metroid things as they popped up, knew how to do the Excite Bike things as they popped up. And it was just cool to get like 4-player version of that with the kids and the adults, and it's just a neat kind of like way to observe these different approaches to gaming, all kind of converging on one gameplay experience that we could all enjoy together, which I thought was awesome.
Because is there like a party mode?
Yes. So this is, and I understand that you've not yet done the local multiplayer like portion of this game.
Yeah, that's right.
And this it's the party mode where you can have between 2 and 8 players, and it just like pops the 4 screens up on the screen, or however many you're playing, and you can choose like a bunch of different like it's sequences, like 5 or 6 of like the little micro game experiences, one after another, and you just do them, and then at the end it's like, here's who earned the most points from it, and it's just a fun like quick little thing. And even if like one of the things pops up and it's like too hard for someone to do, you can always give up, and also they're so short that like you get through them,
Yeah, totally. That does sound fun. That sounds like that would be a fun way to do it.
It really is fun. And like I said, especially in the on like the easier side of it, was just a fun, approachable thing for like everyone to do together.
Well, speaking of which, I also played some Just Dance. I'm trying to remember what year it was. I don't think it was the most recent. So maybe, I think it was a few years old. Maybe it was 2021 or 22 or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
But I've always liked the Just Dance series, and it's still very good. I think it's a fun party game. You get people together, and I really like Just Dance, and I am glad that they continue to make them.
Yeah, isn't this that you and I end up playing so much of our like games, so many of our games alone, right? We're big like solo game players. Sometimes we go online to play stuff, but like not really all that regularly. And being forced into these like family situations, and especially situations where there are kids around, suddenly we're like playing the like more accessible games, or the kind of games that you and I would normally kind of like shrug off, and being like, oh wait, no, it's actually kind of a blast.
Right, and it's always eye-opening to me to play it from that perspective, where I think I talked about it before, but the first time that I was setting up Mario Kart to play with my, like 6-year-old niece, was the first time I really understood why the default when you turn on Mario Kart 8 Deluxe is with those bumper options on.
Yes.
And it's like, oh yeah, that makes so much sense. But I had always considered it an inconvenience or an annoyance before. Like, why would you make that the default?
Right.
But it's like, of course it's going to be buried under another menu that like adults are going to go looking for.
Right.
Yeah. So to have that perspective, like kind of like that reminder every once in a while of how these games work and like why they make the choices they make, rather than like, oh, why as a 40-year-old man,
right,
are they making these decisions?
Right. Which, also felt true for me about Jamboree, where like, I had enjoyed playing games of Super Mario Party Jamboree with other adults, but it was like, oh man, it's still like so chatty and it takes so long. But you play with an 8-year-old and a 10-year-old, and like it doesn't feel like it's taking that long, and they need the information, and they think everything is cute and fun, and it's just like, oh yeah, I don't. Of course, they're enjoying this. Of course, this is perfectly paced for them. They haven't been jaded by like 35 years of playing the same games.
Right.
So, which was, I was playing Tetris on like Game Boy Tetris on my Switch, and one of I forget if it was the 8-year-old or the 10-year-old was watching me play, and she was just like, "How are you doing this?" Like, because I'm pretty good at Tetris, and I was like, "Oh, you have to remember, I've been practicing this for 30 years.
I've been doing this for 3 times as long as you've been alive."
That's right. This is what I've spent my life currency on.
This is my life's work. I also saw the Sonic the Hedgehog 3 movie.
Now, had you seen Sonic the Hedgehog and Sonic the Hedgehog 2?
And I didn't see the Knuckles TV series. Great. I haven't seen anything. I thought it was awful.
Yeah,
I thought it was really bad. But I don't really have that much affinity for Sonic the Hedgehog as a character, and so fair to say that I'm not the target audience for the Sonic the Hedgehog franchise.
Sure.
I think my favorite. I really like. I think Knuckles is funny, as voiced by Idris Elba.
Yeah.
It has a real. He has a real like Drax from Guardians of the Galaxy thing going on, and so I enjoyed. I thought Jim Carrey was like awful. And
here's the thing, he's only coming back for the right script. You know what I mean?
And look, I mean, like, I get the money. Like, it doesn't, and it's just not, I thought it was terrible. I just thought it was real terrible.
Fantastic. What a take. I love it. One of the, sorry, I'm having like 6 thoughts in my head at once. So we had gotten we've gotten all of Sarah's family power-up bands for when we went to Universal, which I'm realizing now we didn't really have a chance to like debrief on. But one of the things that the girls were really excited about, they were excited to get the power-up bands, and they were hyped to have their characters and everything, but then they realized that they were amiibos, and they were like, oh my god, we have amiibos. And so they scanned them into Mario Kart, and then they were like, what are all these other costumes? How do we get the rest of these? And I was like, well, we got to go back to my place and scan in amiibos. So we had like a special field trip from their Airbnb to our apartment so they could just scan in amiibos. And I have amiibos for all of the costumes with the exception of one. Mark, can you guess what amiibo I don't have to scan in for a me costume for Mario Kart?
No, I can't. Which one?
Sonic the Hedgehog.
Oh,
because I don't care about Sonic. But yeah, just very funny for you to be like talking about you're not the target audience. You love video games. You've loved several Sonic the Hedgehog games.
I think just one.
2.
What was the second one?
Well, Sonic 2 and Sonic Mania.
Oh, yeah. You're right.
But I also just want to touch on Super Nintendo World for a second too, because I'm realizing we haven't talked about it on the show. This was my second time there. When you've revisited, did you have to play the level 2 versions of the games?
So the
key games?
So the only time that I revisited was in Japan, and we didn't bring
you didn't bring your power.
We didn't bring power-up bands, and we weren't in there for all that long. Like, we didn't do any of the games or anything. So no, I've never done the level 2 version of like the harder versions of any of the games.
Yeah. So Sarah and I both had the level 2 versions of the games, and the people who were working the games were at least like kind enough to be like, so this is the level 2 version, it's a little bit harder. And all of them sort of like balance out to be like, okay, fine, like it is a little like turn the crank, you have to like turn the crank a little bit longer. It's like fine. But the one where you have to hit the POW block, and it hits another POW block, and hits a third POW block, and that makes a shell bounce up and get the key that way, is so slow. Like the POW reactions are so slow that neither Sarah or I could do it.
Well, and that's one where people have difficult. When we were there, people had difficulty with the level 1 version.
Yes,
because the timing is so weird on it.
Yeah.
So that doesn't surprise me. How was the like land? Like, were you able to do? Because sometimes it can get really busy.
Right.
So were you able to do the things that you wanted to do?
Kinda. We paid for the like early entrance to the park again. But 8-year-old, 10-year-old, and then 4 adults. It took us it was a little bit of wrangling to get us down there on time. Not like when you, me, Mogi, and Sarah went. So like by the time we got down to the Mario Kart ride, which was our first stop, there was a line going all the way back out to the pipe. That like where the world starts. And like we get through the sort of like back and forth of the line. But I just have like no faith in the Universal crew to like manage people and like manage crowds. So like the whole thing kind of feels stressful, and you're always like in someone's way, and you're never really sure if you're in the right line. And it's just like, it's for me a stark reminder of like how much worse they are at it than Disney. Like I feel like when I'm at a Disney park, there's always like 4 or 5 people directing traffic wherever. And it's just like, I don't know, I feel like I'm in a sea of maniacs
and
at Universal.
and the Super
so
Nintendo
tight.
world is so tiny that it seems even in the best of circumstances you'd be stepping on other people.
Right. But so yeah, I really just wanted to shout out those level 2 games that are like a little bit harder and one that's like way harder.
Did you do the one with the sleeping piranha plant where you're like stopping
we didn't.
I just wondered what that would be like.
Maybe that one would be hard too. We had gotten. I still had one key left over from the previous visit. But so we had just done the other 3 games, and I didn't get the POW block one. I got the other 2. All right, Mark, that's what we've been playing the last couple weeks. Let's get into the new releases and what we might be playing next week.
Well, after a week off from updating the Nintendo Music app, we did get a new release yesterday, so it seems like we are back on track for one new release a week.
Every Monday at about 5 o'clock Pacific time.
Yep. And this week's release was Donkey Kong Country 3 Dixie Kong's Double Trouble.
Yep, so we've now completed the Donkey Kong Country trilogy on Super NES. All of those soundtracks are now in the Nintendo Music app.
Yep. Otherwise, there's not really any new releases that I particularly wanted to shout out.
Yeah, I agree with this. Freedom Wars Remastered is kind of interesting, but only in a way that that's something I've heard before. I gotta say, looking at the new releases for this week, and we try not to just like shout out like crappy shovelware games or like names that are funny or whatever. But there are a couple games coming out on Friday that feel like they're indicative of the just like Switch eShop problem. So there's a game called Battle Royal Battlegrounds Call, which is like clearly just trying to pick up on the discoverability of like PlayerUnknown's Battlegrounds, right?
Or like Call of Duty, somebody typing in Call of Duty into,
and then Super Onion Boy Plus, which like I'm sure Onion Boy is another like thing, and Super Onion Boy, and it's just like casting this out over and over again with a slightly different name and the same like sort of shovelware nothing game, just hoping to get people buying stuff sort of blindly. It's weird how much just like crap there is on the eShop.
Yeah, and I guess that's always been true. Like once the Switch hit big,
yes,
the shovelware started flowing, and that's kind of in some ways the sign of a successful platform. Like the Nintendo DS, you would go into the store, you'd go to the grocery store, and in the checkout aisle there would be like Wrigley gum, a Snickers bar, and then like a licensed Nintendo DS game,
right?
That people could buy.
Yeah.
But yeah, it does for. I think especially when substantial new releases are thin, it really makes the shovelware stand out.
Right.
Where it feels like that's the only thing that's coming to Switch right now.
Absolutely. And it kind of is.
Yeah.
But the thing that like makes me a little worried is that like we're about to get a new Switch console. Have to believe that we're carrying over the same old Switch store, or like maybe it'll have a different look or something, or function a little bit better, but like all these games are still going to be there. Like we're not hitting a reset point, right?
Yeah, that's a good point.
Like you would see shovelware piling up on like the Wii U eShop and the 3DS eShop, and then they were like, now we're cutting it off and the Switch is brand new. And shovelware eventually found its way back, but it took a little while. And we just won't have that same like cutoff point here. And Nintendo, to date, seems uninterested in addressing the issue, if they even perceive it to be an issue.
Right. And yes. And I wonder, like, who makes that determination if something is, like, worthy of going on the store or not? Do you know what I mean?
Right, yes.
Like, in some ways, there's a lot of benefit to it being an open platform.
Mm-hmm.
That, although I've heard, we haven't really talked about it. I don't know that much about it, so... but it seems like recently games that previously would have been approved, sometimes like with more sexual content, are now being blocked.
Oh, is that true?
By Nintendo certification.
That's interesting.
And that seems to be a more like recent change. Like they were looser about it previous in the generation, and then recently have just come down harder on it. There's some speculation that it's because credit card companies in different countries, including Japan, have recently become more strict about allowing credit card processing on certain like sexual material.
Oh, that's interesting.
And so
that's I don't like.
That's just speculation, right? And so but yeah, it's an interesting problem to have. I think no online store does a great job at discoverability, but I don't feel like Nintendo has ever really tried all that hard. They have basically like
not. Yeah.
You know, they have different categories. They have a featured section. They have,
and you can turn on parental controls, but like these like more predatory games will still sneak through that.
But I just don't think that there's any like I think discoverability is a hard problem that nobody has solved, and it will be interesting to see how Nintendo tackles it, because I hadn't considered that all of these Switch games will presumably still be available on the eShop.
And that's not a prediction.
No. It's not a lock-in, and it's not one of those, what was
negative
the other one?
Prediction,
Negative
right.
prediction. But maybe they will have like maybe Switch software will be buried somehow, and you have to go like looking for it.
Yeah, maybe.
Or maybe the Nintendo will have like, I don't know. It will be interesting to see how all of this is redesigned.
Yeah.
And how they attempt to solve what they perceive as the problems of the Switch eShop.
Again, even if they even do, right? Well, it's so like interesting to me because like you saying that like credit card companies are maybe starting to in certain regions like restrict what you can buy with credit card, and like sexual content being part of that. That's something where I'm like, that feels like a weird overreach. But on the Nintendo eShop, I'm like, yeah, control that. You know what I mean? I'm like, if you want to find like a hentai game, you can do it on Steam. Like that's not a walled garden in a way that I sort of think like the eShop could be or should be. I don't know.
Yeah, but yes. Yeah, it is interesting, especially because Nintendo in a lot of ways seems like a very not in a lot of ways, like very obviously is a very conservative company, and it is very important to them to be family friendly.
Right.
And yeah, it's just a weird like set of competing priorities that they're trying to wrangle.
Right. Yep. But as we said, there aren't really new releases from this week that we want to talk about, and we're not doing a predictions episode / like, you know, look ahead to the future of this year. So we thought we would just take this opportunity to talk about 2025 new releases that we know about, just to get like just to like kind of level set and be like, here's what's going on this week. Or this year. Sorry, there's like a helicopter like hovering over Mark's house right now, and I'm finding it distracting. I don't think the mics are picking it up, but it is shaking your windows.
Yes, yeah.
Obviously, Donkey Kong Country Returns HD comes out January 16th. That's next week.
Yep. Xenoblade Chronicles X Definitive Edition, March 30th.
And that's the end of the actual dates that we know. And just quick check-in. Mark, excited about either one of those games?
I am looking forward to returning to Donkey Kong Country Returns HD.
Yes.
And seeing how I feel about it. I don't think that it is making any quality of life changes that we know about. Not like, you know, that like the funky mode or anything that was in Tropical Freeze that made that game, for me, palatable, like enjoyable, because it wasn't so punishingly hard. I don't know if it doesn't seem like
it does have
those.
It has the modern mode or whatever that was on the 3DS version.
That's right.
Right. So it's and in addition to, so it like gives you an extra heart for each of the Kongs. And then I'm sure there's like some other thing where you have more lives or something. But it's also all button controls, or it can be. You can also do the motion controls, which was like the big downfall of the Wii version, is that to roll, you had to shake the Wii remote, which is just like a totally counterintuitive way to do like a precision input. But then also it has the benefit of the Wii version in that you can do 2-player local co-op on the same thing, right? So like you couldn't do that on the 3DS version. So this is like the definitive way to play it. It is kind of a bummer that it's a game from like 15 years ago, but it's
been over a decade since I played it.
True.
So I am looking forward to revisiting it.
and I'll not be fooled by Xenoblade Chronicles again. And then at some point in the year, we have Metroid Prime 4 Beyond.
Pokemon Legends Z through A.
And that's all we know of for Nintendo published games through the rest of the year. That's it.
Yeah.
So just it's setting the table as those things are coming. Other games just of note, Professor Layton and the New World of Steam is supposed to come out at some point this year. Supposed to. We'll see. Shovel Knight, Shovel of Hope DX, which I won't shut up about when it comes out, which is just like it's just the Shovel of Hope campaign, but with a ton of extra content in it. And then the Capcom Fighting Collection 2 comes out at some point this year, and that has, the Power Stone games in it, which is why I'm excited. Obviously, there are a bunch of other like little indies and stuff like that, third-party games, but it feels like the calendar is mostly wide open here.
Yeah. Seems like they're saving a lot of space for whatever's going to happen with new hardware.
Yep. Okay. All right, Mark, those are the new releases, but let's close this segment out. Which brings us to a regular segment on our show. It is time for 433. In 1952, American composer John Cage wrote a piece called 433, wherein a performer or a group of performers didn't play their instruments for 4 minutes and 33 seconds. For the purposes of this show, our instruments are talking about Nintendo. So, for the duration of one performance, 433, Mark and I'll talk about something not at all Nintendo related, thus fulfilling the contract of the piece. This recording of 433 is loud. Yeah, I'm just going to turn it down a little bit. Okay, great. We're talking, Mark, about New Year's resolutions. Do you like them? Do you like the concept of a New Year's resolution?
That's interesting. Yeah. Well, yeah. Well, here's the thing. I don't have any memory of ever doing New Year's resolutions.
Sure.
Maybe as like a school exercise.
Yeah.
In elementary school,
yeah.
I maybe did. But otherwise, it's not something that's ever been a part of my life personally. I can't remember ever making New Year's resolutions or really ever even using the beginning of the year to set goals or anything like that. What about you?
Right. I mean, I will say that I become aware of my goals around the new year. And it's not as though I am setting new goals. And I think that's probably the way everyone really approaches a resolution, is that they're only going to select something that is part of something that they've been working on or been wanting to work on for a while. And so I do think that I will wake up on the first and go for a run or something, right? Even if I'm not my New Year's resolution is to exercise more or to start a routine of this and this. And this year in particular, I feel very oh God, I don't know. I can't really sort out what is a resolution versus just what are ongoing goals and things I have to get done. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So in some ways I resent them a little bit. Can I tell you one thing that I was thinking about that is very connected to the new year is seeing a lot of people reveal their lists of games they played and stuff like that. I was I want to do that. I want to keep a list of every movie I see, every game I play, and I want to make an effort to see more movies because I feel I've let that part of my life sort of slide away a little bit, and that I just don't watch as many movies as I used to, especially not new movies. I just saw Wicked last week, and it's that movie's been out for a month.
Oh yeah, I totally know what you mean. Yeah, I feel COVID plus probably just getting out of the demographic that most things are made for has made me also not see as many movies as I used to. And that is something that I pre-COVID, I loved going to the movies.
Yes.
But also living in Los Angeles, I think a problem that I've run into is there is no movie theater I really love going to anymore.
Oh, yeah, sure.
Whereas I feel pre-COVID, there were so many great options for seeing movies in venues that I liked going to.
Yeah, what's crazy is some of my favorite venues now for movies are places I don't like physically going to. Like Alamo Drafthouse, for example. I think it's fun to see movies there, but going downtown, there's that weird parking structure where you have to drive up the corkscrew thing. It's just like becomes this huge hassle. But like, I don't know, the Vista's back. We could go see movies at the Vista.
Right. I don't know. And I have not been to the Vista since it reopened.
Right.
And I should see what the deal with it is now.
It's really just we got no arc light anymore. Right?
Yeah.
And especially when we used to live like in Hollywood near the arc light, that was just the best. And it's not a thing anymore.
Yeah, that is definitely true.
But I don't know. Do you find now when you go to the movies that you like dislike the experience?
No, I still like going to the movies.
Right.
But I just don't do it as often as I used to. Have you seen Conclave?
I've not seen Conclave.
See, there's all these movies. I tried to see Conclave like 3 weekends in a row.
Right.
We had such good intent. My husband and I had such good intentions, and he's such a good sport because he's like, I don't think he cared about Conclave at all, but I really wanted to see Conclave. But every time we went, we were like doing something else, like getting food or,
right.
We were at a mall, so we were like stopping in stores, and the timing just never worked out. It's like, oh, we could wait 2.5 hours for the next show.
No, that's absolutely not going to happen.
Exactly.
Right. But it's like, I got to see Nickel Boys. I want to see Nosferatu.
Right.
All this stuff. We're at the end of this recording. There was no applause here. Also, I guess I turned it down, so maybe that's on me. We were accompanied today by, oops, I didn't write it down, and we've already moved on. Mark, let's get into the news.
Awesome Games Done Quick. 2025 is happening right now. This is the speed running marathon. They happen twice a year. People are playing speed running games 24 hours a day for 7 days and collecting donations for Awesome Games Done Quick. They collect them for the Prevent Cancer Foundation. And these are always a lot of fun. I love when they're happening. I like just turning them on and like having it in the background. And then you can watch, they post the video on demand of all of the runs on their YouTube channel like the next day. And I just think it's a lot of fun. It's fun to see games get played in new ways or favorite games being, like broken open and just
absolutely demolished.
Yeah. So some runs that already happened that I was been watching some of these I haven't checked out yet. The marathon started off with a speed run of Pikmin 1, which I haven't finished, but I watched like a little over half of.
Cool. Now it's my understanding that they got held up by some like weird frog and had to go back to one of the levels in a way that they weren't expecting.
Yes, that's right.
Very good.
Also the like user interface for Pikmin 1 just seems totally cuckoo bananas looking back on it now. Like the fonts chosen and everything that.
No, the fonts are wild in
just
Pikmin
seems
1.
So crazy. Kirby's Air Ride, there was which this game looks terrible. But I think it's funny that Masahiro Sakurai has a design that he likes for his games menus.
Yes.
And all of them follow that pattern.
Right, because Smash does it, and Kid Icarus Uprising does it. Where it's just like, there are some things that are like bigger than others, and they're just like in little like slices of the screen.
Yeah. And then Wind Waker, Astrobot, not Nintendo related, but that seems like a fun one to watch being done. And then a Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild, 2 players, 1 controller.
Sure.
Speedrun seems fun. So those already happened. Upcoming, a playthrough. These are just some of them. Resident Evil Deadly Silence. Yes, let's see that Resident Evil DS port.
Oh, yeah. Great. Thank you. Thank you for pointing out the obvious that it was the DS
Yeah, let's
game,
see that be run. Pokemon Let's Go. I love that game. Tropical Freeze. Superman 64 during their Awful Games Done Quick block. All those are happening on Monday. On Thursday, shouting out Mario and Luigi.
All those are happening on Wednesday. Right.
On Thursday, shouting out Mario and Luigi Partners in Time and a speed run of Tears of the Kingdom. And then on Friday, there's a Nintendo World Championships NES Edition Legacy Trial Race. Legendary trial race that seems like it would be fun. Saturday, they're doing Echoes of Wisdom. And then also on Saturday, closing out the marathon with Super Metroid Map Randomizer Race.
Cool.
You can get the full schedule. Yeah, I really like it. Check it out if you've never checked it out before.
Legendary Trial Race for Nintendo World Championship seems very cool. The Legendary Trials are all of the like ones where it's like beat Super Mario Brothers 1, like just play the whole thing. Yeah, I think that it would be cool to see because it's like a speed run of a speed run. Do you know what I mean? Would be very cool.
The last couple of weeks have seen Nintendo Switch 2 leaks flowing fast and free.
Yes.
So some stuff that is leaked. Pictures of the motherboard, allegedly.
Fine.
New photos.
How would we ever know if that's like, even if if those are legit and we're revealed to the Nintendo Switch 2, we're never gonna know.
Oh, sure.
The motherboard.
I think we will. Like, as soon as the Nintendo Switch 2 is released, like iFixit or Digital Foundry
is gonna open it
will
up.
do like a teardown. And so pictures of the motherboard. More photos of the updated Joy-Con, the dock allegedly with Nintendo Switch 2 branding on it,
which I find surprising if it's real. That I still, it still doesn't seem likely to me that they're going to call it Switch 2.
Well, okay, here's the thing, because I kind of agree with you. It's just like, seemingly we're at a place where many of the hardware components are known, and potentially the branding, if what is on these alleged docks turns out to be true. But it just feels a little too straightforward to me.
Yeah, I agree with this.
But we've seen instances outside of Nintendo where similar things have happened, where like with an iPhone,
right,
the hardware wireframe or whatever like leaks, but then they surprise us with something software related, like when they introduced the dynamic island on iPhones, right? Like that didn't leak because that was software based.
Right.
Also, I feel like, we have the individual components, again, allegedly. We have a dock, we have the Joy-Con. We feel like we know like we have the motherboard. But it feels like we haven't had any confirmation one way or the other from things in the system itself, like a camera, like a microphone.
Yeah.
Like there haven't been leaks really like one way or the other. Plus, like first party games are obviously going to be important. What system software things will be surprising. And maybe there is still an unexpected hardware feature, possibly. But so much just really seems like it's pointing to I would say, very surprising move from Nintendo, which is
not surprising at all.
Yes, which is just we think we cracked this nut, and now here is just a more powerful Switch.
Right. And you had mentioned earlier that like Nintendo is a very conservative company, and like that is true in how they roll out a lot,
like socially conservative,
but also like kind of businessy conservative too, right? Like they know they're heavy hitters, and like when something is successful, they like treat it with reverence and like are careful not to like run people into the ground with it. But like a place where I don't think of them as very conservative is like new hardware releases, where like they take swings. They're very risky in that way, and especially now when they only have the single game pillar, right? Switch is the only way to play Nintendo games outside of iPhone games. Animal Crossing Pocket Camp Complete, which you and I probably both bought and have not turned on at all. And maybe they're just like, no more big swings on that now.
Well, and maybe they have been, I'll say, scared off by the transition from the DS and the 3DS and the Wii to the Wii U, where whether you felt like 3D was a good feature that added to that system, or you felt like the tablet controller was a good feature that added to that system. In some ways, I would say they felt like forced innovations where they didn't really end up adding or mattering that much in the long term to like the types of games that were made. By the end, most games were basically ignoring the 3D feature. It was optional, but very few games were like, no, it is integral to the experience that you play with 3D on. I would say most games, Nintendo themselves never really figured out a way to take advantage of the tablet controller. Not that it didn't wasn't useful for displaying maps and menus and things like that, but that's a hard sell on like,
Right.
and so maybe they are like,
But like the reverse of that is also true, that like Nintendo is the king of delivering on a need the market didn't know it wanted, right?
right.
Like the Wii and like the Switch, where they're just like these huge like revolutions in what like a game console can be.
Yeah, completely. But I think it's a really specific alchemy to say,
Totally.
like, is this the time for that? Right.
Mhm.
And I would say or like, is this the right innovation? And I would say with the 3D capabilities and with like
The gamepad,
the
right.
gamepad, that neither of those were the right moment.
Right.
You know? And
it is so funny that the Wii U gamepad, like one of the big things about it was that it like could control your TV, and like you could use it as a remote for your TV, in like a world where like TV was like just slipping away from.
yeah, it
like
was like
being
right on the
irrelevant.
cusp of being,
Yeah,
and like like iPads
totally. Yes.
were filling that need as well. And so it of like a like touchscreen controller, whatever. Like, and so maybe they're just like, we don't have the right innovation for the moment.
Yeah.
And so we're not going to force it like we did with the 3DS or we did with the Wii U.
Right. But we know we need a more powerful thing.
Right.
So here it is.
Also, maybe there is something that we don't know about that, because again, we've seen the motherboard, we've seen Joy-Con, whatever. We've seen a bunch of components, but we don't really know that much about the system hardware itself.
Yes.
And so maybe there's more to be revealed there that will surprise us.
I mean, there kind of has to be, right? Like there has to be something, and like obviously there will be games, and just there's so little that we know right now, which is why we're not making predictions. Is that like any prediction just feels like blind prognosticating, right?
Right. Like in a way that, and it just feels less fun to me to do that right now, because we know so little, but we know that this big news is looming, that like speculating wildly about the year just doesn't seem that fun to me. I feel kind of worn out of wild speculation.
And the thing will be revealed before the end of March, right? And then which means that there will probably be an E3 time presentation, and that will be fun to predict.
Yes, totally. Predictions will be fun again.
They will be fun again.
Yeah.
They're not right now.
No, right now we just got locks.
Right.
We got reverse predictions, negative predictions.
Right. And the other thing.
And that third thing.
The third thing that was, I can't remember. I'm going to ask you a prediction question. February Direct?
Yeah, good question. Do we get new Switch games announced before the new hardware is revealed?
I bet no. I bet we don't get another. I don't think they can do another marketing beat for anything Nintendo related. Not a partner direct, not an indie direct, until the Switch the successor is revealed. It's sort of where I am right now.
Right.
And I know they set themselves the date of the end of March, but I think it's going to happen sooner.
It feels like
and these aren't predictions.
No, they're not predictions. They're not locks. They're not negative predictions.
Right.
They're not that third thing that we can't remember. But no, I kind of agree with you. And especially with like everything leaking so much, it just feels like everybody is just ready for it to be out there.
Yes. Yep. I agree. And the like prolonging it is not building anticipation for it. It's just getting annoying.
Right. According to Circana, the Nintendo Switch has officially outsold the PlayStation 2 in the United States. By their tracking, the Switch has sold 46.6 million units in the US, second only at this point to the Nintendo DS. So that's a pretty big milestone. Worldwide, Nintendo Switch sales stand at 146.04 million as of September 30th. DS comes in at 154.02 million, and PS2 is over 160 million according to Sony's last update.
And like Sony's been updating these numbers recently, which how do they have new sales information
so
for
I
PlayStation
think
2?
Previously the last thing they had officially said was that it was over 155 million.
Right.
And then when PlayStation celebrated its 30th 40th,
30th
anniversary, they updated it again to say that it had sold over 160.
They had gotten to a point where they were like, it's untouchable, and we're like, we don't need to like narrow in. We know it's greater than 155 million.
Right. But now with the Switch potentially knocking on the door, they want to reassert.
Oh, we better shore up these numbers.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yes.
So a lot of Switches have been sold.
One big question that has never been answered is what Retro Games was working on in that period between Donkey Kong Country Tropical Freeze releasing and Metroid Prime Remastered in 2023. Because there was basically a decade where they were working as a support studio. Like, they were still doing work, but they didn't release a major game. And it's never been clear what exactly was happening during that period.
Right. And it's especially strange just because, like, the 3 Metroid Prime games and the 2 Donkey Kong Country games are, like, heralded as, like, important games in the Nintendo, like, library. But, like, just from the eras prior to the Switch, which were just like not that successful as far as eras go. I mean, I guess like you can say that Prime 3 was on Wii, like a big successful platform, but like it's a weird fit. That genre of game is a weird fit for that platform. Ditto Donkey Kong Country Returns. And it's just like, yeah, where have they been for the last 7 years?
So YouTuber Kiwi Talks, who I guess has done stuff about retro in the past, so has sources with previous retro employees, maybe current retro employees, I don't know, now says that Retro was working on a music RPG between Donkey Kong Country and Metroid Prime Remastered, with the main mechanic being singing.
Okay.
But that's like all we know about it, really.
Right.
Apparently Nintendo canceled it because, quote, it was a huge disaster, and, quote, there were years of it going nowhere. But and so the story goes that they were working on this for a long time. It gets canceled because it was a disaster. And then the plan was for Retro to remaster the entire Metroid Prime trilogy, but then Metroid Prime 4 had to be rebooted. So they finished Metroid Prime 1.
Right.
Started working on Metroid Prime 4. Nobody knows what happened to Metroid Prime 2 and 3 remastered. Were they ever worked on? Were they just canceled? Were they handed off to another studio? And we've had this is getting reported on now because this YouTube video was put out recently.
Yeah.
But we've had bits and pieces of this story all along. I think a few years ago, a poster on Resetera, the online forum, had basically posted that Retro was working on a music RPG that got canceled, but nobody really picked it up or ran with it.
It's also just hard to parse what that means.
Yeah, what does that mean?
Music RPG.
Yeah.
The main mechanic is singing?
Hopefully
What's going on?
The player singing, or is there a accessory that
is it
plugs in
rock band, but the combat is you singing along with something?
Right.
Yeah. Unclear.
So yeah, hopefully someday.
Well, and also there's been the persistent rumors of the Metroid Prime trilogy,
yes,
being on the shelf ready to go. And then that turned into just one remastered, and then okay, but also two's out there too, or
right. And part of the rumor that we have talked about before was that they were going to remaster Prime 1. And in doing that, set up the pipeline for how these games should be remastered, and then 2 and 3 could be handed off to a different studio to do that.
Which, for all we know, is the case.
Could still be true.
Right.
But anyways, yeah, it's always been such a big mystery what exactly Retro was doing, and obviously they were working on something that didn't come to fruition. And yeah, maybe it was this musical RPG.
Do you think that this had a Nintendo IP stapled on top of it? And if so, which one makes the most sense to be a singing RPG?
Which one does make the most sense?
I mean, it could be a Pauline singing RPG.
Oh,
right?
yeah, maybe that was the seed for the idea of a new Donk City.
Superstar? Or what about King DDD? He's a singer, right? Could be a Kirby game.
It could be a Kirby game. Finally, and I guess speaking of Resetera posts, there hasn't been a new game in the Punch-Out.
Look, it's still early in the year. We're getting over like the holiday time where like there is literally no news,
and we're waiting for the Nintendo Switch 2 to be announced. I'm not apologizing. I think this stuff is interesting.
I'm not apologizing either. I just want people to know where we're coming from.
Yeah.
And to say I'm sorry.
There hasn't been a new game in the Punch-Out franchise since the Wii game from like 2009, developed by Next Level Games, which is now really like they developed Luigi's Mansion Dark Moon and Luigi's Mansion 3, and now are fully owned by Nintendo, but at the time were just kind of like a partner. And so yeah, could we have a new Punch-Out game in the future? This was kind of like posed on Resetera, and game reporter Imran Khan posted saying, quote, "I got someone from, let's say, a studio close to Punch-Out drunk at a bar once and asked about a new one. The story I was told, and bear in mind this could just be the perspective of one person and no one else, was that there was significantly more backlash against the characters of the Wii game than they expected. And this team spent a lot of time assuring Nintendo that they weren't leaning into bad stereotypes that would get called out this time. So everyone just kind of furrowed their brow and called it done, especially since other games from that team had much, much higher sales potential."
Yeah, an interesting thing to consider that like as games were coming up in like the 80s and early 90s, that like any of these games that had like big casts of characters fighting games and the like were really just like leaning on racial and ethnic stereotypes. Like Street Fighter is like certainly guilty of this, but Street Fighter's just been like present for a long enough time, and the characters themselves have been like developed, so like E Honda isn't just sumo wrestler, right? These characters all have like histories and personalities and all this stuff that like goes beyond the racial stereotype. And Punch-Out never really had that opportunity.
No, and also Punch-Out's like all their characters were jokes.
Right. Yeah. I mean, yes, and that's another problem there. Yeah.
So, yeah, I don't know. I mean, it makes sense that Nintendo has not really focused on Punch-Out, and I don't know how you do a Punch-Out game like anymore.
Right.
If that's what you want to do it, unless you totally reinvent it, and they tried that and it was called ARMS.
Right. And that how well did that go? What I would do is I would go back to the arm wrestling arcade game and use those characters, because we got Texas Mac. He's a Texas guy. Okay, that's not offensive.
No.
He wears a big cowboy hat. Kabuki, a Japanese sumo wrestler. Okay, maybe not the best. Mask X, who's a bald bull from Punch-Out, just wearing a mask.
Okay.
And then my favorite, of course, no, there are two great characters here still to come. Alice and Ape 3, which is a little girl controlling the mind of a monkey via like robotic remote control.
Okay, that's pretty good.
And Frank Jr., who is a Frankenstein monster.
Okay, both of those are pretty good. Like those in a fighter would be pretty good.
Yeah. So let's, I think, put those in Punch-Out, and then we can bring it back. All right, Mark, that was the news. Let's close this out. All right, that is going to do it for this episode of Nintendo Cartridge Society. Remember, if you're not in our Discord, email us. I will send you an invitation. Anthony DeLuca made our logo. Our theme music is provided by 8-Bit Betty. You can get more of his music by going to 8bitbetty.com or by listening right now. For my co-host, Mark Mitchell, this is Patrick Ellers, saying thank you for listening.